Afcea, thank you. I mean, talk about the right venue at the right time, the right subject. As an inaugural event, this is going to have a long history. This is great, and it really, as the services, and not just AIR, but all of the services have turned their head and said, "Wait a minute, it's about mission assurance. It's not information assurance or enterprise superiority. It's about mission assurance." It's the same thing in the ISR world. Think about the last 10 or 15 years as those two capabilities, those two cultures, those two communities have matured and improved so dramatically. 16 years ago, we were in Serbia and Kosovo just learning how to use imagery from an RPA. We felt pretty good about it, but guess what? Just finding the target, finding the tank next to the building with a red roof, no time for high fives for finding the tank. Now you have to hand it over to a strike platform so you can do something about it. And those were the opportunities to learn. And the clock moves forward, and you think about what we're doing today, and in some cases with armed RPAs, it's absolutely exciting. It was 10 years ago, 10 years and a couple of months, that the services announced cyberspace would be a warfighting domain. And I'll tell you, at the time, you think about situational awareness for the enterprise. All right, where did the wires go? Did the circuits work? Did we have intrusion detection capability, uptime, downtime? Thank goodness we have turned that around. That was all backwards. It start with the supported mission owner first and work your way back. I don't care whether you're on the ground, your maritime environment, air, space, you start out there and work your way back, because you have to understand the mission owner's requirements, processes, how the information has to flow and when. When you deliver information with enough detail and certainty that it's actionable, that's where you start. And unless you can't understand and deliver on that, there is no opportunity. Well, the rest of the situational awareness doesn't matter, frankly. If you don't know what that mission owner is doing out there and how your job impacts you, then it's no good. So, the Afcea community said, well, let's put a panel together to talk about trusted information and mission assurance. And Mike Warlick, thank you. He couldn't have done better finding a group of people to sit up here and advise us and talk about their worlds. To start with, we have Brigadier General Thomas Murphy. He is the 24th Air Force Vice Commander. Oh, I got your reversed on my form. Tom's the one in the middle. The odd thing is, all three of these folks have got sort of New England ties. We've got Worcester University.
That's not right.
Is that how you say it?
No, it's Worcester.
Worcester.
Yeah.
But General Murphy's background had been airlift mobility and training for a long time. But what I'll remind you is the TACC that does command and control for our mobility forces, they've been doing command and control and information assurance and mission assurance for an awful long time. So you'll find he's got a lot to share with us. And then we have Brigadier General Laurie Reynolds. She's the commander of Marfor Cyber. Baltimore, in my mind, is kind of a New England tie. U.S. Naval Academy graduate, long-time communications, cyber experience inside the Marine Corps. So she understands the Marine Air Ground Task Force very well. She understands that mission, and she's delivering it for us now from at Fort Meade. And then Brigadier General Peter Lambert, the 25th Air Force Vice Commander, our ISR component for the Air Force, from Norwich University, and background mostly in the intelligence community, and the breadth of that over his career with joint opportunities, unit level commands on up. Okay, let's get to the discussion part here. In just a minute, I'm going to turn this over to each of the panel members and ask them to kind of describe, okay, what are they doing today? What are their commands doing? What are they working? What are the opportunities? And after that, we'll have some questions that I've put together a few to kind of jumpstart you. But this is audience participation. What I'd really like you to do is, in a moment, put up that slide that says, ask me TNA, and start thinking of some hard questions for these folks, because all I have are softballs up here for them. So if you get those questions ready, we'll get the panel rolling. So if I may, let's start with General Lambert.
Okay, we're on here. All right. Well, first of all, General Peterson, thanks for having me here today to represent the ISR community here. Good to see a lot of friendly faces out in the crowd. So just a little bit about me and my organization. We are the newest numbered Air Force under Air Combat Command. Some of you may have understood my organization as the Air Force ISR agency. We're now 25th Air Force. And the reason for the switch is essentially very simple. It's the normalization and of presentation of ISR capabilities to the Joint Force Air Component Commander. If you asked 99 out of 100 airmen before we reorganized what a FSRA was, the ISR agency, you probably get people scratching their head. Airmen intuitively understand what a numbered Air Force is, and the Chief of Staff of the Air Force and Commander of ACC made a move to normalize that presentation. So here we are. And now we are one of the largest NAFs in the United States Air Force. We represent almost 30,000 airmen worldwide across all of the intelligence disciplines. And so we are supporting the CAF, the Combat Air Forces. We support the MAF, Mobility Air Forces, SOF, Space, and our most recent force contribution is to Afcea. We are a force presenter to General Murphy here under the Afcea umbrella. We present ISR trained airmen to that capability. So we have our feet in both worlds. We're doing ISR, and we're also supporting the fight under the Cyber Mission Force construct for the CMTs and the NMTs, if those of you who knows what those are, and we can talk about that later. Some of our big rocks that we're looking at today is big data. It should come as no surprise that we have been in the fight for the last 15 years. General Peterson alluded to where we were back in Allied force with Preds over Serbia. We've come a long way since then. And we have airborne ISR, ground terrestrial-based ISR, and subsurface ISR capabilities worldwide, providing us a significant amount of data on orders of magnitude that we've never had to deal with before. So our big rock is taking that big data, making sense of it, and sifting through that to allow our airmen to get at those discrete bits of intelligence that are required to support the fight. The other big rock, information sharing, should come as no surprise to anybody in this room that we're working with our coalition partners day in and day out. How do we share that information across intelligence systems? And for those of you who are aware of how that works, that is no easy task of information sharing, U.S. information with our allies and partners. And the last big rock we're looking at is our personnel, our airmen. We have been running them hard for the last 15 years with no respite, and it doesn't look as if we're going to get any relief in the near future. So how do we do our business more efficiently, more smartly, to allow our airmen more time to do things that airmen need to do to take care of themselves, take care of their families, and then at the same time retain them and keep them interested in what they're doing so we don't burn them out. So those are our big rocks, sir.
No, that's great. Thank you very much. General Murphy?
Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks, General Peterson, for having us. I am Tom Murphy, the Vice Commander at 24th Air Force. It's always great to get a chance to sit amongst friends and tell the Afcea story and what we're doing in the cyber domain to support air component and combatant commanders. I will tell you right up front, and like you heard briefly there, I'm very new to this cyber domain. I spent the first 25 years of my career pretty much in the air domain, flying in the training community, and then flying airlifters, moving cargo and other equipment and people around the world. A couple of years in Transcom, meddling in the land and the sea domain, doing a lot of the same with multimodal operations. But I am definitely new to this cyber business. So I've operated in 3 domains for a while. I will tell you right up front, in the past 2 years, it didn't take me long to realize that this domain, unlike those other 3 I just mentioned, is far more complex. And in my opinion, it's contested unlike those other 3. It's contested so much that in a week period, we defend against over a billion attempted inbound malicious connections into our network. That's with a B. And about 5 million attempted outbound malicious connections. So I don't think that there's an argument anymore that this is, in fact, a contested domain. So you can imagine I was pretty nervous starting. I heard that I got this job a year and a half ago because I had a technical degree from college. It's at Worcester Polytechnic Institute. I was a mechanical engineer there. I'm not sure how that qualifies me for the job, but I was brought in, I think, to operationalize cyber for the Air Force and kind of bring an air-mindedness, but I was nervous coming in. Quickly, though, I was pleasantly surprised to see that we run operations in the cyber domain, at least for the Air Force, much like we do in the air domain. And I'll just give you one example. Our operations center, which is our C2 hub for our forces in cyber, right over at Lackland Air Force Base, they produce a cyber tasking order every day. There's one in planning, there's one in execution, and there's one in assessment every single day, and it runs on a recurring process. Much like an ATO or an air tasking order would be run out of an air operations center. It allows us to kind of determine where we need to prioritize our efforts, what weight of effort we're going to put into it, and then kind of design the force packages that are going to go after those issues based on operational necessity and the risk to the network. So again, I think that that was important for me to see that I could kind of get the lineage from where I came from, and it fits. So don't kid yourselves. This isn't your grandfather's comm squadron. This is, in fact, cyber, doing mission assurance, which is what I believe this panel is all about. The other thing about the cyber tasking order is it allows us to scale, because today we don't have enough capacity to do what it is we need to do, and I'm not sure when we will get enough capacity, and based on the threat and the evolution of that threat, it's potential that we won't ever have enough capacity to do what it is we need to do. Our mission in 24th Air Force is pretty simple: fly, fight, and win in, through, and from cyberspace. You'll notice that there's a fly in there. We debated a long time whether or not you can actually fly in cyberspace, but we're the Air Force, so we needed it in there. Thanks for that, by the way. Feedback is good. And we do that to enable our 5 Air Force Corps missions. 5 major lines of effort. We build the network. That's everything from the IT, the sustainment, modernization, long-haul comm. We do that with our engineering and installation units mostly at Tinker Air Force Base. We extend the network with our 5th Combat Comm Group at Robbins. They go to austere locations and make sure that comm is set up when needed. There's about 50 or 100 of our combat communicators deployed at any given time. We operate the network, providing services to 1 million Air Force users. We defend the network and the key mission systems connected to it, and then we engage the adversary if required, if directed, and if we have authorities to do so. Now, last thing I would say is defense is key. I think anyone in this room agrees with that. It's like in sports, defense is key. In football, I think a key to a good team is a good defense. Bronco fans would probably agree with that, right? And I think in this domain, however, the advantage goes to the offense, right, like Tom Brady. So in that an adversary only needs to get into one machine and then conceivably move laterally and create disruption, destruction, exfil of data. So defense is clearly key in this domain. So that's all I have, and look forward to your questions. Thanks.
Thanks. General Reynolds.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, everybody. So thanks for inviting me to participate in this. I look forward to the discussion. I took command of Marine Forces Cyber in September, and General Peterson's right. I have a background as a communications officer inside the Marine Corps, but I'll tell you, I'm not sure the communications completely prepares you for the challenge of cyber. It's such an interesting mix of operations, intelligence, communications. It's all those things. So it's been a very, very fast-moving 6 months for me. I have 3 missions as a commander of Marine Forces Cyber. My first priority is to operate and defend the Marine Corps Enterprise Network. So that's the Marine Corps portion of the DODN that keeps us very busy every day. And General Murphy's right. Every day there's something happening on the network that keeps you on your toes. My second priority is to provide warfighting support. So by that I mean providing offensive cyber capability and defensive cyber capability to in my case, in the Marine Corps' case, Special Operations Command. So we have 3 offensive cyber teams that are aligned to provide offensive support to SOCOM and others as needed. And then the growth of our defensive teams and support teams and so forth. And then my third priority is to bring value back to the MAGTF. So what do I mean by that? So when we built the Cyber Mission Force, as many of you know, we built it to provide warfighting support to combatant commanders. There's no real additional value inside the Marine Corps of cyber-trained Marines. And so about 6 months ago, then Commandant General Dunford assigned the Commander Marine Forces Cyber as the Assistant Deputy Commandant for Information Warfare. So in my second job, my task is to figure out how do we bring together those information warfare, information-related capabilities together in a way that provides value to the MAGTF. So going to General Peterson's point about building the network from the tactical edge back, right? So how do we make sure that in the fight to come, we will be able to disconnect as necessary from the enterprise network and still be able to function, still be able to grab our data, still be able to maintain the advantage over the adversary, whether it's through use of EW or cyber or other capabilities, and what is the right force mix to be able to do that. And we have a commandant right now in General Neller that absolutely understands this. He's willing to give up lethality for dominance in the information domain. And so that is a challenge and also an opportunity for us. And so as we move forward, we have a lot of work to do, I think, to make sure that we can, from the tactical edge back, maintain superiority to be able to enable those commanders to command and control and deny the adversary the same. So those 2 jobs keep me very busy. It's fascinating. My head's been exploding every day as it seems like everything we do inside Cyber Command is kind of the first time we've done it. So that's one of the challenges of being in a new command with new missions is you're paving new ground everywhere you go. But the fascinating lesson learned in that is all of the same principles of warfighting apply in cyber, and we're having those lessons. I think from the Marines' perspective, we have in some of our current challenges, we've just resorted to the things that we know how to do: is proper planning, the warfighting principles, get after it, and it's been in some cases a blinding flash of the obvious as you go about setting about challenges. So there's nothing really new about warfighting. It's just a different domain, and it's a very complex domain. So look forward to your questions.
Yeah, great, thank you. Okay, 2002 to 2007, I know each of you either were operating or supporting operations over in Afghanistan and Iraq. Lots of different roles, but thinking back those many years ago compared to now as we're confronting ISIS and we've moved back over there with capability and teams, any recent lessons learned that you could share with us that, what have we moved forward, what's new, what are the new problems? And maybe we can start with General Reynolds this time.
Yes, sir, thanks. So, as I just said, as we think about how to participate in the counter-ISIL fight in cyberspace, again, the lessons that we are drawing from the fight that we're in right now is really, it's probably not going to surprise many of you, although, as I said, some kind of Well, let me just start. So what is the process whereby you begin to figure out how you're going to provide support to folks on the ground, or be able to deny or dismantle or do any of those D words that we use in warfighting? First off, trying to figure out what the D word is going to be is very difficult in cyberspace. Do you dismantle? Do you deny? Do you degrade? What is your capability to do any of those? I mean, starting with basic mission statements in cyberspace has been fascinating. I think one of our first lessons learned, though, as we have tried to go about the counter-ISIL fight, has really been the enormous need for intelligence. The cyber mission force still requires all-source intelligence fusion to be able to apply resources in the smartest way forward. And I would suggest that that's a way forward. As we think about the cyber fight in the way forward, we have to think about that. We have to think about where is that all-source fusion coming from. I think the IPB, the intelligence preparation of the battlefield, just as important in cyberspace. It's a lot of work to get after that. And in our case, in the Marine Corps case, we just had a couple really smart young Marines that figured out that the only thing that they really knew how to do was the Marine Corps planning process, the same process that we all use. We got after it, and what do you know? You can come up with a warfighting plan that looks a lot like the air plan or the ground plan. So I guess the other thing would be the process that you use for targeting and things like that. Again, very similar to other warfighting processes that we've had in the past. We just had to, you just had to do it the first time to kind of break the impasse that we seem to have in the cyber domain. So I'll stop there as a first go.
Well, as you bring up the issue of intelligence fusion, maybe we ought to turn it over to General Lambert, because your world changes every day, but any particular lessons learned that you could point us to from the recent?
Yes, so let me hit on the non-cyber piece first. So you talked about 2002 to 2007, initially after 9/11, taking the fight to the adversary, and we were making some very quick gains because it was kind of first encounter with the adversary, first contact. Since that point in time, what has changed is we have an adaptive adversary. And we have an adaptive adversary that is leveraging revolutionary or evolutionary technologies in a manner and at a pace that requires us to keep pace with that. So just when we've cracked the code on certain communication technologies, the communication technology will change, or the method by which people communicate will change, because they've finally come to the realization that it's no longer safe to use those particular communication technologies. So it's incumbent upon our airmen and the entire intelligence community to keep pace with the rapidly changing technologies that people utilize to communicate. The second thing I would say is on the cyber front, when I say the rapid pace of change, I mean we're talking days. TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures change in a matter of days. And how agile are we in the cyber fight to adapt to those changing TTPs? The running joke that we kind of like to utilize inside 25th Air Force is, when we try to develop a tool or a platform to look at these things, we apply the traditional Department of Defense acquisition process to the development of those tools. And people want to take a 12-month study to look at this particular tool, then we'll do a 3 to 5 year test and evaluation program. And my comment back to them is, well, that's interesting, but we'll have changed the platform 3 or 4 times in that 3 to 5 year period. So we need to think differently about how we apply the technologies that we need to do our business to fight this fight. And we need to change that mindset. We need to change that acquisition mindset from the traditional, procure a tank, procure an aircraft, to how do we procure a cyber tool inside the decision cycle of our adversary. And so that's what's changed. And I don't see that letting up anytime soon.
Great. General Murphy?
Yeah, I don't have much to add other, this adversary, like pretty much all of our adversaries today, require information flow and they need to see to their forces. And I will tell you that ISIL is actually more savvy than most people actually give them credit for. They use the internet pretty well to deliver their propaganda and to recruit fighters. So I would just say that there are ample opportunities for us in this domain to create effects. And I think the Secretary of Defense and Admiral Rogers have both spoken pretty eloquently about it over the past couple weeks about what our plans are for counter-ISIL efforts in this domain.
So one other point I just would probably make on this is, it goes back to General Murphy's comment earlier about how contested this domain is. And I think it speaks to the need to begin planning from the very beginning with all the partners you're going to need, because everyone gets a vote. It's an incredibly complex process that when you need speed of decision making becomes a bit of an obstacle to getting after it.
So a couple of months ago, I was speaking to some of our airmen at Afcea down at Shaw Air Force Base, and that's the component to CENTCOM. When we had gone back in for the ISIL fight, all of the networks that we had torn down with allies and embassies, and they were busy putting those back together again. But it was, as you all know, so much of it was bilateral, and that brings up the question of information sharing. So. What roadblocks is that causing for you? And number two, is there anything that you think you're doing to help with the information sharing? And three, what do you want industry, if you have some ideas about that, to help with? So, General Lambert.
Certainly. So, so we are working hand in hand with Afcea to tackle that problem. I'll look at it from two different perspectives. So what we need from industry going forward is leveraging open architectures on our side that ingest large amounts of data, and all of that data is data tagged in a common standard that allows us to move that information around internal to our networks and potentially over to allied and partner networks. So I think within the intelligence community, we've already demonstrated the ability to data tag to a point where you can put in security procedures that allow that information to be moved around in a very rapid manner and to give more information to our analysts. So open architectures, we need to step away from the proprietary architecture that can't communicate with other architectures. Everything has to be on an open standard, a common standard, and the data coming in must be data tagged in a manner by which it can be readily sortable by algorithms and machine-to-machine capabilities. So that's the biggest one. And then there's some policy and authority challenges that we face. And this is kind of a self-inflicted wound, and it's nobody did it with ill intent, but we developed our networks, at least on our side, on the ISR community, and as they evolved over this past 15 years, we kind of hindered ourselves and our ability to share that information as freely as we would like. So the challenges Afcea is facing today is just what you said. How do we rebuild this in a manner by which we can share with the increasing number of partners that we have, particularly in that area of responsibility? So behind the scenes, we are working very hard on the open architecture piece, and we are partnering with industry on that. But the warfighters need it yesterday, and our partners need it yesterday. And so working through the systemic roadblocks that our own policy challenges kind of throw in front of us, we're working that vigorously. But we're embracing new ideas on how we can ingest that big data and then the comm pipes that are associated with that.
General Murphy?
Yeah, I agree with General Lambert. I think for starters, we need a common strategy and solution for a coalition network. I think that they're all different based on the COCOM you're at, and I think so. One common network would be a good thing there. This is clearly a joint fight. It's not only coalition, but it's academia, it's industry. Industry has a lot to offer in this domain, and frankly, we're actually looking at Pathfinder efforts to potentially move some of our data into the cloud. And who's going to defend that? Is it us? Is it them? Who should it be? What's core to the Air Force? And we're taking a long, hard look at that. But I think that industry, in many respects, has been at this for way much longer, and they have even better strategies potentially to defend in the cloud for sure. So,
General Reynolds?
So just to foot stamp the requirement for these things that General Murphy and General Lambert have described. In a lot of cases, our opportunities are increased when we are able to share from the beginning inside the interagency and inside the coalition. Some of our coalition members can do things that we simply can't. And so we have common cause. We just need to be able to share information with them and take advantage of perhaps some of the policy and authorities that they have. And if we don't get after this, we will run into walls over and over again. And so just to foot stamp the requirement for it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Let me change and all of you spoke about it in your first introductions, but the people, the manpower, the team that you rely on, and no one will disagree, very complex environment, very fast moving. What are you doing for continuation training and keeping your airmen, Marines up to date, up to speed, ready for the fight? Are there initiatives, are there shortfalls? So, General Murphy?
I think what's most critical is, from the beginning, is recruiting the right people with the right skill sets. Looking for those folks that are in the STEM career fields. Cyber Patriot goes, Air Force Association sponsored Cyber Patriot. I think there were over 10,000 students last year that participated from middle schools and high schools around the country. So that is key, and getting them right out of basic training and putting them in the right pipeline. We've expanded our cyber training pipeline at both Keesler and at Hurlburt to make sure that we can double the capacity as we build the cyber mission force. I think that's critical. Air Force is building 39 teams out of the over the 130 teams total, and that's a huge training requirement that comes with that. I think live fire exercises are critical. We perform them both internally with 24th Air Force and externally with combatant commands and red flag exercises. We have a closed range where we can actually have red teams and OPFOR going out on the network trying to do bad things while our operators try to defend against that. So that's how you keep them ready for this fight. And we've also started a Ready Cyber Crew program, which kind of mirrors what I came from in the flying career field, where there's continuation training requirements, there's a training shop in a squadron, there's a stand eval, and you're actually going to train and get evaluated based on those measures of merit. And that is relatively new to the cyber career field. So feel very confident that our operators are in fact what we need them to be. Our trainers, our students, when they go through training, there's about a 95% pass rate. So we're very happy with the quality of the cyber operator that we're getting today.
Thanks. General Reynolds?
We're going to all the Air Force schools.
There is nothing wrong with that.
I know. General Neller made an interesting comment about 6 months ago, just when he became our new commandant. And cyber, and as I said, this information environment, the new challenge, is clearly on his mind. I think he understands the challenge that we have ahead of us in future warfighting. And he made the comment, he said, I worry about cyber and sustaining the capability. He said, do I have to change my recruiting to accommodate the number of cyber warriors that we're going to need? Do we need to allow the kids with, earrings in their nose and purple hair to come in? So the answer is, yeah, we'll shave the hair. That's not a problem, but the nose ring has to go. But the answer is no, right? No, you don't have to do that. There are smart young men and women who want to get after this. And what I think we have found is yes, if we have increased the number of young Marines that are going into this kind of MOS, and we're too small to have a strictly cyber MOS. We're producing 13 teams, some of them in the comm field and many of them in the signals intelligence field and intelligence fields. So our challenge is finding a way to retain a career path to kind of, once you give the advanced training for those young Marines and they spend now we have them for 4 years in the Cyber Mission Force. How do I then get them back as a senior enlisted leader later? And so we're looking for those jobs inside the MAGTAF so we can give the advanced tools and the advanced training to take care of the MAGTAF, right? Especially on the cyber defense side. And as I said, the training is something that we're continuing to look at to maintain the skill set that is absolutely required. But I will say this, it's a little soon to tell for us on how our retention is going to be for these special skill sets. It is a challenge, especially in the National Capital Region, for the civilian side of the workforce, because there's lots of folks that are seeking the kinds of capabilities that we are building into the Cyber Mission Force. But we are still finding that the Marines just want to be Marines, and so that's encouraging. But we do think, I think that there's a challenge ahead of us if we don't figure out how that career is going to look for a cyber warrior.
General Lambert.
So we have a couple of initiatives underway. Some of you may be aware of the Air Force-wide studies that we have ongoing in the remotely piloted aircraft and distributed common ground system weapon systems. Those two weapon systems or categories of weapon systems have been in the fight for the past 15 years, 24/7, 365, and it hasn't stopped. The problem that has been created by that is the ops tempo has precluded kind of doing some of the things that we used to do 20, 25 years ago of setting time aside for reconstitution and for training. So we're tackling that, and that's being done as we speak. The other thing we're doing is getting back to basics. We've been following high-value targets, high-value individuals for the last 15 years, and some of our skill sets on countering near-peer competitors and the complicated weapon systems, integrated air defense systems, command and control systems that have been proliferated. The skill sets to take a look at those things has somewhat atrophied. And so we are reinvigorating our target training courses to run more airmen through those than we have been in the past. We are taking a look at how we move information, how we train airmen to be proactive and move information and be anticipatory versus passive reactive in support of the Joint Force Air Component Commanders. So we have a number of those initiatives underway, and we will be formalizing those soon within this year to increase the pipeline and get airmen back in touch with the Air Force and some of the core things that we need to be doing in looking at near-peer competitors. The last thing we're doing here locally in San Antonio is taking a new look at how we train our airmen. We have a number of initiatives underway at 25th Air Force utilizing various devices that our airmen are very comfortable with, particularly our young 18 to 21-year-old airmen. I think some of these devices are actually surgically attached to their hands. They never let them go. So we are leveraging that phenomenon, and we are working with partners here in San Antonio, academic partners, to develop applications to go on these devices that we give them and to look at training, language, how they analyze things, and putting it in a kind of a pseudo-gaming environment, things that they are interested in, things that they enjoy, and so that when they leave work for the day, they're just not going to say, oh, I got to go through, this 400 pages of training manuals and fall asleep after page 2. They're going to be interested in these things. They can put their own apps on these devices and then go back and forth as they see fit. We're already seeing some benefits from that, and we are hoping that that technology will proliferate more. But that's something exciting that our airmen are excited about, and they are very happy to be the guinea pigs, so to speak, because it's something that they love to do, and we're giving them something that they need in a format by which they enjoy. So that's some of the initiatives we have going on here.
Thanks. Well, I warned you to mail your questions in because what I wanted to make certain was that we got some interaction with the audience. And so If you could tee up some of the questions that came in, we'll tackle those.
Thank you. We have received very many more questions than we'll have time to answer. So thank you to the audience, and we're sorry if we don't have time to get to your question. The panel has talked at length about cyber being a distinct domain that has truly come of age. How long until cyber, much like the Air Force of the 1940s, receives its own service to concentrate on the domain as something with its own legs to stand on? Is the CMF a precursor to this future service?
No. I don't think so. Personally, I'd like to hear what these general officers think, but I don't think the CMF is a precursor to that. I don't think that we have, like we talked about capacity earlier, with our numbers in the services in general dipping a little bit now from where they were, 10 years ago. Clearly, I just don't think that there will be the ability to go to a unique service based on cyber. I think the way it is right now, while clearly we need to work through some C2 issues and how we're going to actually command and control these forces, I'm not sure that adding what could be another level of bureaucracy would be the right thing to do. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think our challenge right now is not to separate cyber, but to more integrate cyber, right? So the challenge that you have right now with commanders is they do their planning and then they go, hey, can you sprinkle on some of that cyber? That's not how we do this, right? We need to consider cyber from the beginning as another warfighting domain, integrated into the planning in the same way that we integrate air or the other 4 domains, space, all of that. So we need more integration, not separation. And so I would suggest no. The worst thing that we could do is create a cyber service. That just creates another stovepipe of, I don't know where that would take us, but that's a great question.
And I'll just echo that and add one more thing. So, I talked earlier when I introduced myself about the normalization of the presentation of ISR capabilities to the warfighter. Likewise, cyber needs to be normalized in that sense. So you'll hear a lot of talk going forward of multi-domain operations, and I think we will have achieved success when we've normalized the introduction of cyber operations into our multi-domain operation construct. And each service has a particular value added in their cyber personnel. I mean, our airmen are air-minded. They understand what our Joint Force Air Component Commanders require, and same with the Marines. The Marines understand what the MAGTF requires. So we bring some of those specialized skill sets to our service components that I think is necessary.
Absolutely.
Next question.
This question is for General Reynolds. Pardon me. How active is the dialogue between service chiefs of cyber on their lessons learned, capability needs, operational requirements, and training methods? How joint is cyber and cybersecurity today?
Okay, so there's 2 questions there. I would suggest that we have a boss at Cyber Command, and Admiral Rogers, who's very interactive with the service chiefs and the other combatant commands. I would suggest that in the last probably 120 days or so, he has done a really good job of keeping the other combatant commanders aware of the priorities that he has in cyber and how he is trying to deliver cyber effects to them. And on the service chief side, he's very conversant with them about where we are with the build of the cyber mission force, how we're reporting readiness, things like that. So there is, I think, a very healthy dialogue that happens between Cyber Command and the services. How joint is our, if I got the second half of that, how joint is our ability to defend? Was that the question?
That's correct.
Okay, yeah. So we could do better in this. I think having JFHQ Doden that is there to help kind of integrate the efforts across the Doden has been a positive thing. But I still think that each service has their own way, their own tools. I think in the last perhaps 90 to 120 days, there's increasing pressure from the DoD CIO for us to all begin to work better together, to have common tools, to get after things like PKI encryption, and we're watching carefully what the Air Force is doing with their tools, even as we're seeking to come to some resolution on some common tools. It's still a problem, and I think as a taxpayer, we need to get after this in a better way. But going back to General Lambert's point that he made earlier, we have to have a way to do this more rapidly, right? Because if we continue to take, the DoD 5000 approach to acquisition of tools, we will never come together on this. And so that would be very, very useful as someone who has to defend the McSen every day is, if we had a body that understood what the right, tool set is for, the next challenge, then I'll buy it. We just need to get after it. We spend a lot of time wringing our hands, and one service goes that way and the other service goes that way, and I don't see it come together that way.
At the tactical level, how do we fully integrate the cyber domain into the traditional planning process, especially in units where there are no available cyber specialists? Are there any lessons learned or success stories from current operations?
I'll take a shot at that. That's exactly what it is that we're trying to accomplish inside the Marine Corps. My thought is that, so right now you have in the Marine Corps at the MEF level, at the 3-star level, you have the G39, who is historically STO, SAP kind of planner. We've created the Cyber Electronic Warfare Coordination Cell kind of inside that G39. I think personally we need to pull it out of that so that from the beginning you have one person who is kind of bringing together for the commander the fight in the information environment, beginning with how are we going to defend our networks, what is your cyber key terrain that must be defended at all costs, and then how do I bring together, again, EW, tactical cyber, signals intelligence together to bear at the right time to take care of the commander's critical needs. So we're looking at a couple COAs right now. I would suggest even just this summer at both 2 MEF and 1 MEF, we're going to be experimenting with this. I think that what we will end up with inside the Marine Corps is kind of an 06 level operational commander who is charged to do just this for the MAGTF commander. So I think the future is demanding that we do this, and the cost of not doing it is going to be probably pretty costly. So the problem is with authorities, to be able to bring together some of these effects at the tactical level. That to me is, I think, one of the biggest challenges that we have ahead of us.
Yeah, I'm not sure I heard the question actually. I think you're talking about cyber at the tactical level, and if whether I'm answering it or not, you can determine that. But I would say that something that the Air Force is going through right now is, and many of you have heard it as Cyber Squadron in the future, or potentially Comm Squadron next. This is something that will be fully mature in 10 years, in 2026, and what the intent is to get service organic capabilities out to the base level to defend their enclave inside of their base firewall. Right now, like we talked about earlier, the Air Force doesn't have the capacity within 24th Air Force to go ahead and, through a federated process here from San Antonio, to go out and defend all the bases. I think it's important to build capacity where the traditional comm is now replaced with, not completely replaced, but there will be cyber operators in an ops group, which is, I think, the right place to do it, where these cyber operators at the base level will not only defend the network for the base portion of their enclave of the Air Force network, but also the weapons and mission systems that are on that base. So if it's an F-16 base, they're going to be responsible for defending those F-16s when all the touch points through cyber, whether it be a laptop that they upgrade the system, or that's going to be their responsibility. So I look forward to seeing that evolution over the next 10 years. I think it's the right way to go.
So I just have one thing. So we're already talking about how do we bring the byproduct of cyber down to the tactical level. And I know Air Combat Command has been talking about fusion warfare and how we are going to support our 5th gen and beyond platforms with the most exquisite kinds of intelligence required to feed those platforms. So that's going to take some time, but cyber ISR is certainly a part and parcel of that construct. And so we are putting some of our best and brightest to take a look at how we actually do that going forward. But that will be at the fighter squadron level, so to speak.
The need to reduce the acquisition timelines, especially regarding cyber requirements, has been brought up several times this week. Is there anything specifically being done to streamline this process?
So yes, but the services and the department are large organizations, and so that takes some time. The Air Force has a Rapid Capabilities Office that is working to streamline and bring on board capabilities more quickly. But just my personal experience over the last 2 years, having been in this seat, is that there's still a large body of talent out there in our Air Force that is still looking at this from a traditional perspective. They're still looking at this, and I don't. It's almost you're taking their world and turning it 180 degrees, and that's not what they're used to. And human nature is what it is. People want to fight the change, but the fact of the matter is, studying a new application on a laptop for 12 months and then doing a 3 to 5 year test and evaluation process in that is clearly not the way to go. And if you look at our intelligence community partners who can develop and then implement a new tool within days, that's how we're going to be agile, and that's how we're going to keep our competitive edge.
Yeah, so we talked about, all of us have talked about the requirement to rapidly field cyber capabilities. And, I've made comments in the past, and potentially the acquisition community takes offense to it. I don't mean any offense. It's just that that's a set process. And baking in cybersecurity into a weapon system that's going to be fielded 10, 15 years down the line, you've probably baked in the wrong ingredients, but conceivably. It's better than nothing. But I think we need to be able to, you have to have speed, agility, and precision in this domain. And we're getting better at that. My boss, the commander of 24th Air Force, has some authorities, real-time ops and innovation for a couple $1 million in a certain time frame. He is able to be able to field capabilities rapidly. LCMC, the Lifecycle Management Center, has some rapid cyber acquisition authorities. So we're getting better. But baking in cybersecurity is just when the threat changes by the hour and not the year, we probably need to think through that.
Yeah, I would agree. I want to make sure I set the right tone here as well. I mean, we have a lot of really hard-working patriots that are trying to get after this. We have a Rapid Acquisition Office as well inside of the Department of the Navy and Systems Command for us. But it's hard, right? So you want it bad, you get it bad. We don't. You still have to consider the whole .mil PF piece of fielding anything, because there's engineering, there's lifecycle management, as General Murphy mentioned. There's who's going to install it, who's going to maintain it, and before you know it, you've got 80 different contractor support contracts inside, in my case, the CNDSP, because we fielded a tool and we fielded a contractor with it because we didn't do all of the things that we really should have done that you would with any other kind of traditional fielding plan. So you really have to be careful about that, because we want to be able to maintain these systems on our own. And so I guess we probably need to define the word rapid. Anything shorter than 5 years is good.
So can I just add one more thing? So Lieutenant General Otto, who's the Air Force Director of ISR, I was at a meeting with him a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about this problem, and we were talking about the problem in the context of some of our larger weapon systems, primarily the DCGS, Distributed Common Ground System. And they are doing some technology demonstrations, and he's avidly pursuing these technologies that don't .mil-PF is always going to be a factor, and we need to factor that into the equation. But his point is, instead of implementing a new technology on a particular weapon system and then handing the airmen 10 stacks of shrink-wrapped training manuals that they need to carry with them at all times, he says, why can't we build intuitive technologies that you get a trainer,
That's right.
sit that trainer down in front of the team of airmen for an hour, and then after that hour, the airmen are good to go. And so, again, it's changing the paradigm, turning the paradigm on its head, and building intuitive technologies aided by technology versus the traditional approach of you got 10 pounds of shrink wrap documents that sometimes they don't break the shrink wrap on those things. But we got to field something that is better for the airmen, that allows them to interact with that more quickly, certainly, but without ignoring .mil-PF. Just put that out there.
Given the problem with training sufficient numbers of cyber warriors across the force, would there be any benefit to a central campus or school for both education and sustainment in mid-level and continuing level education and training across the joint force?
It certainly would be for the Marine Corps. I mean, and I think for the taxpayer, that makes a lot of sense. We do have an opportunity with a brand new domain to think about, how we do things in a more joint way. And, the basics of cyber defense and offensive cyber are the basics. And so, yes, I would say yes, there would be a benefit to that.
Yeah, I would say that I'm all for it if it works for each particular service. A few years back, the Air Force in cyber, we designated 7 cyber weapon systems, and our operators actually, when they go to IQT at Hurlburt, they start training and touching and operating that weapon system, and then they get back to their particular unit, and there's more on-the-job training with that weapon system. If the other services aren't going to use those particular weapon systems, a joint school might be a little bit more difficult, but certainly that we could overcome it if required. The services don't train aviators all at one joint school. They each have their own. So I think, is there opportunity to go that way in the future? Probably is, but I'd have to see the study.
I think we're already tackling that around the margins. There are some joint schools in the cyber arena that we're already leveraging, and then working with our IC partners to leverage some of that joint training, but you're right.
Yeah, I'll just offer one thought on that. The services already share a lot of training. I mean, you go down to Fort Rucker, where's our rotary wing training for the services, or a lot of places where whether it's aviation, civil engineering, transportation, we already share. And the reason I bring that up is, this 85% that we're spending on the enterprise today, any way we can make that more efficient, combining schools, standards, certainly the basic training, maybe not as you get into some of the initial qualification training, but that's exactly what we ought to be looking for as we move forward, so we can drive it from 85 to 80 to 50% taking care of the enterprise.
The next question is for General Peterson. You participated in early drafting of the Air Force Cyber Concept of Operations. What has surprised you, good and bad, in progress to date in the Air Force and within DoD?
Well, the first thing that surprised me is it's been so difficult to get the battle rhythm of a 624th Ops Center, a Joint Space Operations Center, and the chaos around the world that we end up supporting today, to get the battle rhythm going correctly. Where, no, it's not the same processes at each site, but the battle rhythm and the end product have to be integrated and fused so that JFAC, CFAC can deliver it to a combatant commander. Little by little, that gets better. When I started, it was the battle rhythm was exchange some PowerPoint slides. Well, it's much advanced beyond that now for the 6024th. They are far better today than they were in the past, and I just hope we continue to improve that. The other thing that surprised me was when we first started to discuss cyberspace at Air Force Coronas, we had a number of very senior officers that were certain that this was never going to happen. It wasn't important. We don't need to do that. What surprised me was it was only, in terms of generation, it was the only next generation of general officers that absolutely embraced this warmly. That, yeah, we're not doing it right, but it is absolutely something we've got to get to. Cyberspace has to be part of our playbook, and it has to be integrated with the rest of the effects we deliver. So those are the two things that surprised me.
Can you discuss the concept and possible future of an Air Force Global Vigilance Command?
So there's been a lot of discussion about Air Force Vigilance Command. And so we had the privilege of hosting General Welsh down in San Antonio. Both General Murphy and I did with our bosses. And so, philosophically, General Welsh's concept is, information today and in the future will be the coin of the realm. And that's a direct quote. It will be the coin of the realm. And so if that is true, then how do we organize around that? And so I think General Welsh would argue the formation of 24th Air Force and 25th Air Force are probably the first steps in that evolution. We've organized a CNAF, a numbered Air Force around cyber, and we have a NAF around intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, which are two key components of a future construct. So I think where the debate lies is how do we go about doing this? What kind of time frame are we talking about? And then what else comes in? So when you talk about information, is information command and control? Yes and no. It depends on who you're talking to. And so, General Peterson was just talking about generational differences. And I truly think that as we go forward and we bring new capabilities on board, we need to think holistically about the C2 of all of that and flatten those structures. And I think all of that kind of builds into what the Vigilance Command discussion is talking about. Every platform will be a sensor going forward. So how do we grasp all of that, and how do we organize around it? And so both of our organizations have been knee-deep in these conversations for the last 6 to 8 months. And so we will continue to contribute our expertise to that discussion. But ultimately, the service is going to have to make some decisions, whether that's a path they want to continue taking. But the senior leaders that I've talked to are hopeful and cautiously optimistic about the prospect, but it's going to take some time.
How are the components and commands represented on the stage designing their planning and operations to account for the new capabilities of the F-35? Are there any new planning tools being used? Are there any new post-mission techniques being developed to integrate information, and are these new TTPs entering the training systems of the services?
So we at 25th Air Force are heavily involved in trying to provide, I think I mentioned it earlier, that discrete level of intelligence support for our new 5th generation platforms. We call that intelligence mission data. And intelligence mission data is it's hard, laborious work that requires that big data that I was talking about earlier. The big data that we're ingesting today, how do we tag it, categorize it, and then feed that data into these platforms to make them the platforms that the designers initially envisioned to take full advantage of all their capabilities. So IMD is front and center from headquarters Air Force on down. The resourcing of it needs probably just some additional attention, but I think it's a matter of prioritization. But we are on that now, and we recognize the importance of that data to support those platforms.
I think the same is true for the Marine Corps, right? So I mean, we recognize the incredible capability and and increased data throughput that the Joint Strike Fighter is going to bring to the battlefield. And so, looking at all of that now, I think our Deputy Commandant for Aviation has a whole team that's looking at that and the integration of data on the battlefield. We know it's going to require more intelligence specialists. We also know that it's going to change perhaps the way we do aviation command and control. And so one of the additional things that we're looking at is how can the improved aviation command and control capabilities that we're beginning to field change the way that we command and control inside the MAGTF at large, right? So how do you bring the aviation C2 elements into the larger MAGTF for the other domains? And so, yeah, I think this Joint Strike Fighter is going to change a lot about the way we do things.
Thank you. That was our final question for the panel.